Brian May was asked to launch a small public event. A cub reporter from the local free paper was sent. Selina Scott was making cupcakes for the orphans of Ukraine. Not literally, she wasn't sending Tupperware by plane. Instead, she planned to sell them at the local village fete and try and gain support from local celebrities that she'd met. She had a heavy maybe from her friend Lindsay DePaul, and Bradley Walsh and Sue Pollard said they would man a stall. She knew Anita Dobson from the nearby Spartan gym. Anita said that Brian was in town and decided to volunteer him. And so it came to pass that on that tragic autumn day, a scribe drove up that gravel path to speak to Brian May. The editor didn't want anything left field or too surprising, just a picture of him with a cupcake, maybe licking off the icing. But May was spitting teeth before the man came on his mission. How dare Anita volunteer his time without permission? He'd met Selina Scott once at some do he was attending. Her attitude to rock and roll he felt was condescending. And if Anita had taken time to phone him up and check, she would have known he'd planned to do some fishing with Jeff Beck. So by the time the journalist drove up his private road, Brian May was incandescent, ready to explode. He'd never really been known to get angry or frustrated, despite what his cascade of tumbling curls insinuated. Freddie threw the hissy fits, Roger was erratic, John had built a fully working robot in his attic. Brian's thing, if anything, was that he was too polite, but on this day you could have called him Mr. Fahrenheit. This was how a simple question started to unfurl the rampant chain of death that was to shock the entire world. The doorbell rang. The tune? It was Who Wants to Live Forever. The journalist who stood there, he was young and not too clever. Brian wasn't in the mood for much verbal expansion. He led the boy to the most self-restrained lounge in the mansion. And as they walked along the stylized neo-Gothic hall, he saw the ornate antique fireplace May had had installed. And then he said the words which now reverberate in space. Did you really make your first guitar out of a fireplace? The query was just innocent. The question wasn't loaded. But it just lit a tinderbox and Brian May exploded. Why do all you fucking journals have to bring that up? Why would someone like myself make something like that up? I'm fucking Brian May. I'm the guitarist out of Queen. They voted me the 7th best guitarist that's ever been. Do you have any fucking notion of my worth, you cock? Have you never heard my extended solo work on Brighton Rock? I also wrote We Will Rock You and Hammer to Fall. I even signed the lead for the bridge to I Want It All. You never give me credit for my wide spectrum of knowledge, my astrophysics PhD from Imperial College. At this point, Brian took a breath, both to breathe and to think. He tried to calm his anger and to pull back from the brink. He tried to calculate the reason why his temper could now evaporate the 7 seas of rye. Only now could he apply some small amount of reason and realise the question had been tantamount to treason. Or should the curly axeman have behaved more circumspect? Perhaps the boy had panicked and had meant no disrespect. This state of mind was nullified by his next question though. I do not understand. Was that a yes, or was it no? Brian May stood up and out the back door he did head, and placed himself inside his large Edwardian garden shed. 3.5 hours he spent in there, his purpose was unclear, leaving the young journalist to stew in baffled fear. The boy could hear the far-off noise of power tools at work, and through a distant frosted pane he thought he saw a spark. At 3:30 the mate emerged, grim-faced and shoulders aching, and in his hands he brandished what he'd spent the morning making. The boy was forced to drop his tea as he surveyed the scene. Brian May had made a guitar from a high-pressure patio cleaner. The axeman strode up to the boy without an air of grace and played the solo from Save Me right in the journalist's face. And while the cleaner stroke guitar was an abomination, it managed to invoke the trademark Brian May intonation. He dropped the hybrid instrument and it crashed onto the floor. And wordless once again he did repair to his shed door. And once again the sound of tools could be heard from afar. Was he now turning a hovermower into a guitar? No. This time the result was much more sinister than that. This time Brian May had made guitar from his own cat. The journalist did vomit when he saw this grotesque thing, a mess of blood and guts and frets and fur and paws and string. He pulled himself together and he sprinted to the door. He couldn't see his car though, where it had been parked before. He turned around to see the sight that made his hot blood freeze, the glint of Brian May's eyes and the glint of his own car keys. The boy's legs buckled quickly as he saw what he had planned, as Brian May approached him with a sceptre in his hand, the sceptre gifted by the Queen for playing on her home, which killed the novice writer as it crashed upon his dome. The fate of that young boy was to be broadcast wide and far, the first recorded human to be turned into a guitar. But not the only person to be remodelled that day, as the world became a witness to the spree of Brian May. He jumped into his Bentley and he drove down to the village and scanned the streets with lifeless eyes in search of human pillage. The next innocent victim of this whole grotesque affair? A blonde au pair that once had looked disparagingly at his hair. He spied her through the window buying bin bags in the Spar. 90 minutes later, that au pair was a guitar. Brian May now only had one vision to acknowledge as he approached the car park of the Agricultural College. A musician once respected for his genius and his scruples proceeded to make guitars out of 150 pupils. No one managed to escape this hideous fiasco. The local school, the old folks' home, the 24-hour Tesco. His last words to be heard were on the answering machine of his favourite publication, Total Guitar magazine. He planned to go high profile with this homicidal spree and make guitars out of the Pope and the royal family. Roger Taylor saw this in his house in Andalus, observing all the horror carnage unfold on Sky News, and heard the chilling message left by the murderous rock star. Don't fall asleep. When you wake up, you might be a guitar. In 30 minutes, an emergency helicopter was relayed, and he stood with a megaphone behind a police barricade. He said the words, "Is this what Freddie would have wanted, mate?" which broke the cycle of guitar-based death about 5 days too late. Because Hertfordshire was all guitars, with no one left to play. The only human standing now, the feral Brian May.